The true purpose of any spiritual practice is to enhance quality of life. Why does anyone practice any type of spiritual practice? Really, we believe in this space that the answer is because we have a belief that engaging with the spiritual practice ultimately enhances our quality of life. And so I'm thinking this morning about what is it about spiritual practices, or in particular, the study of the mysteries that enhances quality of life. And I feel that the answer to this question, if we can frame it that way, what is it about studying the mysteries that enhances the quality of life? I feel that the answer lies in the expansion of awareness, the expansion of awareness. So when we study the mysteries, when we engage in an authentic, open hearted type of way with these deeper questions, these questions about the nature of existence, these questions about what is the phenomena of life, like what creates the experience of life that we seem to be having, or what is the nature of reality itself? When we ask these questions, just by the nature of asking the questions, our awareness begins to expand. And there's something about expanding awareness that measurably enhances our quality of life. And I think there's a couple of dynamics to this. I think this is not really a simple thing, but rather there's some nuance and complexity to it. I think one of the reasons why asking these deeper questions about the mysteries, about really seeking to understand, to know in a more intimate way the nature of reality, I think some of it yields a more satisfying experience of reality. I think with the expansion of awareness comes an appreciation for the magic. The magic, I suppose, is one word, but really the mystery itself, like an awe of really what this whole reality is and our place in it, and how the world responds on the outside to the states that we embody on the inside. And just really there's something, intriguing and in a way mystifying about the nature of reality as we experience it. And as our awareness of this expands, I think that our awe, that our joy, just simply at being a part of this divine arrangement, I think that begins to expand. I feel that that's kind of the nature of this. And as our awareness is expanding and we become more aware of the nature of reality, we begin to operate in ways where we are now more aligned with kind of the way that everything works. We're more coherent, we're more aligned, we're more in tune, we're more in flow. And I feel with all of those things comes a greater experience of joy. And I think ultimately, being able to fall in love with your reality, to experience deeply a sense of joy, of being part of the creator, a sense of joy of being the author of your reality, the author of your experience. I feel that is really what, at the core, at the fundament, really enhances our quality of life. So in the expansion of awareness comes the expansion of a quality of life. And so any spiritual practice that is designed to expand awareness, therefore, can be linked to this idea of expanding or enhancing our quality of life. Now, here in Sunday Mystery School, we're asking a lot of deep, nuanced, and really well-considered questions about what is the nature of reality. And we have used Neville Goddard's original 1948 Masterclass, 1948 lessons as they are widely known online, as really the fundament of our level 1 mystery school exploration. So really learning to frame our experience of reality through the ancient mystic writings of the Bible, and learning to decode the allegory, the metaphors, the stories, the parables, to understand the mystic meaning that is woven into the details of the stories and then presented in a way where they would survive for countless generations through these ancient mystic texts. And now we have reached the part of Sunday Mystery School where we've gone through all of the 5 lessons and 30 episodes of Sunday Mystery School and really expanded and illuminated these teachings that are designed to really expand and illuminate our awareness, and by extension of that, enhance our quality of life. And now we're at the part of the lessons where we're asking our own questions here from our local modern community who has sat through Sunday Mystery School, who has really deeply explored these teachings. And now we're asking our own questions. And in a public forum where we can really sit with them and ponder them, explore them, again, all for the very distinctive purpose, ultimately, of enhancing our quality of life. And so that's what we're doing today. We are continuing with questions gathered from the community. And there is about 100 of them that were submitted over the couple of weeks that the forum was open. And so we're going to dive into a few of them today and take a deeper look. And again, just to really emphasize, while these ideas can be intellectually stimulating, while they can really, take one's awareness on a flight of the imagination, really the ultimate goal of everything that we do in this space is to support and encourage and enhance one's own individual practice of the tools, the practice of the techniques of imagination. So everything we talk about in this space is really intended for each and every person who is a part of this space to use as support and guidance and encouragement to go into the silence and to know deeply from within one's own being, to really have that first person present tense experience of the I am. That is what this space is designed to lead and guide us into. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move into the question and answer session. But first, before we do that, I'm going to take a moment to speak a blessing over everyone who is gathered here today. The purpose of this blessing is to set the tone of the space, to remind us that everything that appears to be on the outside is actually a product of our own consciousness. And as such, our words have tremendous power, and these words have been chosen with tremendous intention. So I invite you to join me now. We're going to speak this blessing, and then we will get into the questions for today's session. I turn now to go within, drawing my senses inward into the center of my own being. I offer gratitude and appreciation in this moment for the perfection that is this present moment. In gratitude, we accept that we are, and we declare that we are wise souls, growing healthy, youthful minds. Thank you that we are feeling now the presence of life force energy, awakening, enlivening, and making whole our bodies in the physical dimension. Thank you that our relationships are now healed with love, compassion, and understanding. Thank you that we have humbly accepted our power and our responsibility to imagine wisely as sovereign co-creators of the world we share. Thank you that we are inspired by life-expanding, consciousness-uplifting possibilities that are manifesting now. We honor the ancestors who have walked this path ahead of us. Thank you for the wisdom passed down from the ancients, encoded all around us in the spirit of liberating our hearts and our minds. And thank you that together we welcome the inheritance of our bright and beautiful future. And so it is. Okay. Last week, we had some really beautiful questions. It was episode 32. We went in depth into some very beautiful questions. And these questions all kind of, the two questions that we went into last week kind of were related to each other. This question we're going to start with this morning is from the same student, Shireen, and is a separate third question. I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so the first one for today. Regarding the concept of brazen impudence, I want to know if I can link the memory of a past success and apply that memory to a desire. For example, I had a bill due and I assumed the state of the bill being paid. The day prior to the due date, I then received a long distance call offering me the money needed. Say I have now a new desire. Can I tap into that same memory for this new desire? Meaning, in the last story, I didn't know where the money would come from, but I keep playing the old memory of receiving that call offering help, even though these are separate events. Okay, so the question here is, I had a previous success. So I had a situation where I imagined the desired outcome, and then the bridge of incidents occurred, and I manifested exactly what I needed at exactly the time that I needed it. Can I tap into my memory of this prior success and use it to manifest something new in the present, a new desire, even though they're separate events? So this taps into a concept that we talk about as a reference experience. A reference experience. So that's basically the core idea of a reference experience, is that you can use memories of similar events to inspire imaginal acts on whatever you're presently aware of, whatever you're present to in this moment that is a desire. You can use a reference experience to inspire how you handle that desire. So basically what you have here is a previous experience that is now a part of your personal body of evidence. Okay, so you can go online, you can go on YouTube, you can watch 10,000 videos of law of attraction coaches telling you that when you assume that your wish is fulfilled, you get a successful outcome, and you can listen to 10,000 success stories. Okay. All of that can be valuable, but ultimately, what is really going to inspire your faith is going to be when you personally, individually, have your own body of successful experiences, your own body of personally experienced evidence that the law works. And this is why we talk about a lot in this space, on this channel in general, about the value of journaling. Whenever you have successful manifestations, write them down. The idea being that in the future, when you need to reinforce or kind of rebuild or inspire your faith, you can go back to your journal of all of the things that you have consciously manifested previously. And that's your personal body of evidence. You're not relying on someone else telling you that it works. You know that it works. And here is your list of personal experiences that prove that it works. Okay. So this question taps into that same idea. So you can use your own personally collected body of evidence from the experiences that you've had in the past of successfully manifesting your desires to inspire your current situation or faith in a manifestation that you are currently engaging with? Okay. So, in short, the answer would be yes. Can I tap into that same memory for this new desire, even though they are separate events? Yes. So, there's a feeling. Here's where we're really going to get into it here. So, there is a feeling associated with this experience that you had. And I'm going to guess, given the situation of a bill being due and the day before a call comes offering to pay the bill, I'm guessing that that feeling is one of relief. So you assumed that it was paid. You were just trusting that it would be paid. And then when that call arrives and says, hey, let me take care of this bill for you, there's probably a feeling of gratitude, appreciation, and relief. Okay. So that feeling, gratitude, appreciation, and relief, that really is a master feeling that can be applied to any situation. So you can tap into a new manifestation, a new situation, a new scenario, whatever it is that you're assuming to be true, right? Whatever assumption that you are appropriating for yourself. You can assume the feeling of gratitude, appreciation, and relief, and use your memory of your prior success to inspire that feeling, using it as a reference experience. Okay. And in so doing, you can actually enhance and amplify the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Right. So it's we can create the feeling of anything by using our imagination. So even if you've never done or been in the past the person that you're appropriating yourself to be, meaning you don't have any firsthand personal experience, in your imagination, you can create the feeling of what that would be like. You might have to be a little imaginative, but you can create it. And when you do have a body of previous experiences to draw from, that can further inspire that feeling of the wish fulfilled. Okay, so it can be used as ingredients in the kitchen that you're really baking into the dish. Right? You're using previous ingredients that you know already are very delicious. Okay, as you're baking your new creation. Okay, so linking this idea to brazen impudence. So brazen impudence implies this. I mean, the words really say it all, right? So brazen impudence. So it's very boldly asserting something, even when there's no physical evidence for it, in a way that is truly brazen. Okay, so brazenly assuming something, yes, you can brazenly assume something and use your previous success, in this case, the phone call, paying the bill. You can use that to inspire the faith for a brazenly impudent assumption. Okay. So not only can you do this, I think this is actually a great best practice. Whenever you are manifesting something, so you become aware of a desire and you're like, okay, I need to assume this desire. How would I go about assuming the desire? I think it's a best practice to actually review your memory and find situations in the past where you had an easeful success, okay? Where it arrived right on time. And then tune into that feeling that was inspired by that event of gratitude, appreciation, and relief. And then use that to catch the mood of the new feeling of the wish fulfilled that you're appropriating in the present moment. I think you could actually call this a best practice. Yeah. Okay. Great question there. I think we've covered that. I think we've illuminated what's there, and really explored how this can really be used for anything. I mean, so your new desire could be on any subject, but you can lean on a previous successful manifestation as inspiration for the faith and assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled and catching that mood. Yes. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, so those were all of the questions from this submission from Shireen. So now we're moving on to another question. This next question is from a community member, Kelly. And this is Kelly's question. How do we communicate with family members that follow the Bible and are labeling themselves as Christians? I'm currently going through this as my sister and her husband are staying with us for a little while. We discuss the Bible, and they do not do certain things because of the Bible saying not to. I'm open to your opinion. As Neville says, everyone is ourselves pushed out. I want to express Neville's teachings to them, but it seems I hit a brick wall. Okay. This is a fascinating question because there's a lot of nuance to it. And I really appreciate that you called out everyone is ourselves pushed out while examining the situation and the relationship with these family members. Okay, so there's a lot of nuance to this. Let's break some of it down. So, as we all know, Neville's interpretation of the Bible is distinctly different than traditional religious interpretation of the Bible. They really come from two very different places. They really come from two very different models of reality. The traditional religious interpretation of the Bible is formed upon a basis of understanding that the supreme creator of the universe is a being that is entirely separate from a human being. It is an external God. It is a God on the outside. And the characteristics that are described in the Bible about this external God, lead one to believe in a traditional religious sense. There's this sense of intense separation of the individual human from this distant third person external God, and a general sense of lacking worthiness, really, to be in the presence. So worship is demanded, commanded. There has to be an intermediary, either in the form of a church member, like a priest. A man is your intermediary between you and this external God, or this idea of Jesus Christ as being an external being and being an intermediary or a bridge. So it's really a completely different paradigm. So contrast that with what Neville teaches us. So Neville's teaching us that there really is only one thing that we all are, that the whole universe, multiverse, polyverse, like our whole experience of reality is consciousness, and that everything that we experience in reality is a phenomena of consciousness, that matter evolves out of consciousness versus consciousness or evolving out of matter. So matter gets really complex and then consciousness pops up as an evolutionary product. That's not the Neville model. The Neville model is that consciousness is the only reality. There's nothing but God in the world. God is consciousness. Consciousness is God. God is love. Love is God. And so our whole experience of reality is predicated upon an experience of consciousness. And so we are physical vessels for an individual perspective of consciousness. So this is a very different model of reality. So in the Neville model of reality, everything exists in consciousness. And so everyone and everything is indeed ourselves pushed out. And whatever experience we're having in consciousness, meaning our conscious mind, meaning our thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors, beliefs, speech, really everything that formulates our state of being, that's all happening, in our internal awareness. I put my hands around my head as though it's in my brain. It's really not, but it is present and local to me. Okay. So present and local to me, I have my state of being. And then what appears to be the external world is really an echo of that internal state of being. Okay. So self pushed out. So it's really, I'm singing a song, my thoughts, my actions, my behaviors, my speech, my feelings, my emotions, everything that I consent to and believe is true. That is my state of being. My state of being is a song, and it's singing in my awareness. Okay. And that song is echoing off of the mirrors that is my reality and reflecting back to me so that I can really, as consciousness, through my individuated perspective, I can really know myself by experiencing myself. Okay, so these are really two very different models or paradigms of what reality is. So while the text, the ancient mystic text, is shared between these two different perspectives. Okay, so traditional religious interpretation, of the Bible is it's still using the Bible, and then we have the mystic or mystery school interpretation. In this space, we talk about Neville's interpretation specifically as really being the founder of this mystery school in a manner of speaking. We have that interpretation still using the Bible, but the level of discernment of really teasing out what the stories are saying and the depth of meaning conveyed by the stories, they're really on different levels. Okay, so how to communicate with people that are in the other paradigm. Okay, so the first thing to realize is that really everyone is ourselves. Everyone is you. Everyone is me at a different stage of the journey. Okay, so I like to conceptualize the journey of life through reality as being a mountain. Okay, and that's like everybody is climbing a mountain. Okay, and the mountain is long, and there's many paths up the mountain. There's as many paths as there are humans because each person can take their own path. Okay, up this mountain of awareness. Okay, and so some of us may be halfway up the mountain. Okay, others of us might be a few steps, from the base of the mountain. Others of us might be a few steps away from the very peak of the mountain. Okay, so if you consider that everyone is yourself, you can kind of build a way of relating to all of these other people by understanding that everyone is yourself at a different stage of climbing this mountain. Okay, so people that perhaps have we'll say, different and maybe a little bit lesser, like a different level of awareness. Okay, so they're at an earlier stage of the journey up the mountain, but they're still ourselves pushed out. Okay, so it's like me, but younger. Okay, so I came from a traditional religious interpretation of the Bible. That was my upbringing. So when I encounter someone who really has a very strict fundamentalist, type of interpretation of the Bible using the literal interpretation of the words rather than the metaphysical mystic wisdom, I can relate to that because I was once thinking in that way. So really, I see them as me, but in a younger part of my journey. Okay, so I say all of this because I think the first step is to really understand what they're reflecting back to us. Okay, so in this case, I think that these family members are reflecting back to us an earlier stage of our journey. So this is an opportunity to be what you would have wanted someone else to be to you when you were at that stage of the journey, right? So it's like really putting yourself in those shoes of like, okay, I'm, young in my journey. Here's someone that like has a different level of awareness that can maybe shine some light and help me in my journey. How would I want them to be? Right? To like be obviously loving and wise, but in a very relatable, non-judgmental type of way, right? I would want to feel like they were looking at me as part of themselves, right? So it's first of all, it's an opportunity to kind of build that bridge in that way. I think that's an important place to start this discussion. And then from there is this idea of I think a lot of people go through this. So a lot of people find the teachings of Neville, and all of a sudden, it's like their consciousness, their world is blown wide open. And it's like, oh my, suddenly, reality is starting to make sense. Suddenly the world is starting to make sense. And maybe you do a couple of conscious manifestations and then you get really excited. You're like, oh my goodness, I found the secret. Like this is literally the secret to living the life of my dreams. And so with that passion and that excitement comes this desire to really tell everyone. Okay. And we see a lot of people, I think this is part of the stages of growth of the journey. I think almost everyone goes through this, particularly if it's like a big breakthrough, a big revelation. Like, oh, I have to tell everyone that this is like, I found it. I found, the Holy Grail. I found the key, Eureka. So you go through this really profound desire to like tell everyone. And so understanding where that comes from, I think on its core, it's well-meaning, but also understanding that everyone is on an individual journey and everyone will come across what they need to know at the time they need to know it. And attempting to rush that journey for another, even if it comes from the best of places, okay? Even if your heart is wide open and you're loving that person, but if you have this like, you need to be different than what you are type of energy, you need to think differently than how you're thinking right now type of energy, or you need to believe something other than what you're believing right now type of energy, okay? That is not a productive energy. Rather, I think the more balanced, loving, wise type of way to engage is rather from a place of saying, okay, I recognize in you a part of myself, perhaps a younger part of myself in terms of the journey, right? That has nothing to do with chronological age. It's all just about journey. I recognize in you a younger part of myself. So let me feel deeply into my heart. And if there is something that I can say that is maybe turning on a little light, okay? But not from a place of you on the outside need to be any different than what you are. Just simply what I found is that this works for me. It's like turning on a little light with no projection onto the other of like, you need to know this, or you need to be this way, or you need to think this way, or you need to even acknowledge that what I'm saying is wise or illuminated anyway, right? If there's any neediness in that, it's not productive. Okay. Because now you're literally just screaming at the mirrors, right? And we all know that's not how this game works, right? So this is a great opportunity to practice really recognizing someone else as being a part of your own self. And then from that place of love, I think there's a like a calm, rather than that, like, oh, I have to change you. It's like, no, I'm going to let you be exactly who you are. And I'm also going to shine my light in a gentle type of way without expectation. Okay. So I'm not expecting you to be any different. I'm just going to shine my light and accept you as you are. Okay. So I think the next stage of really discussing this question is, if you're recognizing this other person or these other people as aspects of yourself pushed out, then the next question is, okay, how do I relate to those aspects of myself? So there's no one to change but self, as we know from these mystery school lessons. So if you're seeing someone, and I think all of us in this space can relate to this. All of us have probably quite possibly been this person, and then all of us probably know someone and can relate to what I'm about to say. There's some people who live in what seems like a loop of self-destructive behavior, that it seems like from our perspective, it would be so easy to do a pattern interrupt if they just knew, that they were creating it for themselves. If they only could just see for a glimpse of the mirror that they're actually creating it for themselves, then like this loop could be interrupted, right? And so from that, there can be this, oh, I need to tell them, okay? And it's like, okay, maybe, but definitely double check that intention of where the telling them is coming from, right? It should not be coming from a place of judgment or from expectation of you need to be different than what you are. It should come from a place of love. Okay. So if you do want to change your experience of that person, and you remember that whatever you're seeing them experience, you're literally manifesting them showing up that way, right? Because they exist in your consciousness. Okay. So if you want to use the tools that we have in this space to shift your experience of them, then what you would do is you would go into the silence and you would literally reimagine them. Okay. So this is the higher way of changing someone else through changing oneself. Okay. So how would we do that? We would go into the silence and we would call this person before our mind's eye, and we'd make sure that we do this from a place of love. Okay, so we really need to make sure the heart is open before we ever engage with our psychic imprints of another in this way. We want to make sure the heart is open. It always needs to be based in love and gratitude, appreciation, harmony, coherence, right? All of those high vibe emotions. We would call that person from this state before us, and then we would create a scene that would imply that they have ascended to a new level of awareness. They have broken the cycle, or kind of jumped out of that track of repeating track of self-destructive behavior, right? Something that would imply. Okay, so I'll give you an example, a personal example. Okay, so there's someone that I am aware of in my consciousness who was in a repeating, habitual, long-term cycle of substance abuse. Certain substance that just seemed to be a constant presence in this person's life, and a destructive one by anyone's account. Anyone could see that this was a destructive presence in this person's life and experience. And so when I became aware of this, what I did was rather than, telling this person, hey, you need to stop, like, hey, you need to be something else other than what you are. Okay. Because a lot of people think that that's how you change in others. You go and tell them, hey, I need you to be different than what you are. Okay. But that's not the mystic wisdom. Okay. The mystic wisdom is, okay, I see you, other part of me. Let me go into the silence and change you in my own being from a place of love. Okay. So that's what I did. I went into the silence of my own being, and I called this person before me, and I saw them tell me a couple of things. Okay. So this was a whole life glow up in my imagination for this person that I care legitimately for. Okay. So this person, I heard them tell me, hey, I've decided to get sober. Hey, I've decided to fix up my living space. Hey, I am now dating someone that I'm really excited about. Like I said, whole life glow up. I went the whole 9 yards. I was like, okay, what would be the most amazing expression of this person's life potential? And I went into my mind's eye, and I know this person well, and I interacted with them and heard them say these things. Okay. And this was a couple of years ago. I would say probably 2 years ago that I did this imaginal act. Okay, so I went into my own imagination without ever telling them, hey, I need you to be different than what you are. Rather, it was, I accept you exactly the way you are. And in my imagination, I am reimagining you, because that is the loving thing to do. That is the Jesus Christ thing to do. My imagination, I reshaped the vessel, right? The potter's house. I went to the potter's house, reshaped the vessel into what I felt was, according to the golden rule, this is what I want someone else to imagine for me, right? If I was in the same situation, I would want someone to lovingly imagine that I'm now sober, my living space is glowing up, and I have a meaningful relationship. I feel loved, right? Okay, so in the 2 years since I really experienced the desire to reshape this individual in my imagination, all three of those things have manifested at separate times. But in the past 2 years, this individual has come to me and told me all three of those things exactly as imagined. Okay. So I think really the whole idea here is to really recognize what is happening, recognize it's an echo of something on the inside, and then go in and change the part of the song that is singing out of key. Okay. Part of the song in our own state of being. I'm looking at the question again here. I want to make sure we've thoroughly answered it. How do we communicate with family members that follow the Bible and are labeling themselves as Christians? Okay, so that part. Okay, so there's a lot about the Bible that we can relate to, because we are scholars in a manner of speaking of the Bible. We do have a different level of interpretation of it, but that can be interesting conversations, particularly if the intention is not to change someone else's perspective, but rather to just to have kind of an open-hearted, open-minded, um, you know, discourse about it. Yeah, like, hey, I look at this verse this way. How do you see it? Oh, interesting. Okay, I hadn't really thought of it that way. Like, just like as opposed to this kind of undercurrent of like, hey, I need you to think the way that I think. Okay? That's the key thing that we need to get across in this space is if you're approaching someone else, anyone else in any situation where you're like, hey, I need you to be other than what you are. Okay? And then you're doing something on the outside to try to make that change happen. That's not what these mystic teachings tell us to do. These mystic teachings tell us to accept on the outside a person exactly as they are. And on the inside, if we feel that there's something better that they could be, from a place of love and the golden rule, so we only ever do to another what we would have done to ourselves, right? That's the key. We go within and we reshape the vessel. Okay, so I think that's the key idea here. We discuss the Bible. They don't do certain things because the Bible's saying not to. Yeah. So I think the other thing that I would call out about this question is that the optimal place from which to engage with situations like this is curiosity. You cannot go wrong with curiosity. So just as a general rule, you cannot go wrong with curiosity. It's, oh, interesting. Why do you see it that way? Genuinely curious, though. It can't be a faux curiosity. It has to be genuine curiosity, which means you open up the state of curiosity in yourself. And then from a legitimate, authentic curiosity, you ask them, interesting, why do you see it that way? Or, how has that improved your quality of life, like living this way? Or, why is that important to you? So it literally becomes this place of like, let me get to know you better rather than let me judge you and, wonder why you can't be different than what you are. Okay. So I think that's the key there is like opening up with curiosity so you can still have engaging conversations, but like curiosity, I think really diffuses a lot of the expectations or undercurrents of judgment. It's just, I'm just curious, right? In my polyverse, it's this way, but you have your own version of the polyverse. I would like to understand a little bit more about where you're coming from. And I don't feel threatened, in any way by what you're saying. And I don't expect you to feel like you need to be, any different just by talking to me. Right. So I think that opens up this place for a very beautiful interaction. Now, I appreciate this question because I feel like a lot of us can probably relate to it because we're on, this journey. We're at a certain place on the mountain, each of us being in our own place in the mountain. Then we encounter people that are, at different places on the mountain. It's like, okay, how do we engage with these ideas and with other people? And I think that this, at least having the opportunity to talk about this kind of sets a little bit of a frame for some best practices in terms of how to engage with other people. Okay. Let's move on to another question. So this question is from Shelley, and Shelley asks, how do you live in the assumption and the 3D at the same time? How do you live in the assumption and the 3D at the same time? And there's two other questions here that are related to the first. But we're going to start with the first because I don't want to cloud the first with the other two. So let's start with the first. Okay, so how do you live in the assumption and the 3D at the same time? So this is the idea that an assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. Okay, so consciousness is the only reality. So what I am conscious of, I will experience in my reality, although it might require an interval of time. Okay, so that's this idea of, 2 years ago, I did this imaginal act for my friend. And the final piece of that imaginal act manifested in, I think it was August of this year. Okay, so it was like almost exactly 2 years that it took for this bridge of incidents to unfold. So there can be an interval of time. So how do you live in the assumption and 3D at the same time? So the basic idea here is that you're assuming an upgrade to reality, and everything that we behold on the outside is old. Okay, so everything that is currently in our experience is a product of past states. Okay, so our other states that we have been in have materialized and hardened into fact. Okay, so at some point, let's say you have a career as a dentist. Okay, so at some point you started living into the assumption of I am a dentist. Okay, and then over time that assumption hardened into fact, and now you're a dentist and you have a dental practice and you have all these tools and techniques, and you're board certified and you have diplomas and this and employees and that, right? So it's literally over time everything hardened into fact. Okay, so then let's say you make a new assumption and you desire to be something else. Again, you can expect that it's going to be intervals of time and it's going to manifest according to a narrative. Okay, so how do you live in the assumption and the 3D at the same time? Well, just a couple of best practices for it. So one I would say is you have to, okay, so let's go through all of the steps here. So you have to really know what you want, and then you have to use the tools to create an experience of it so that you're creating a new memory. Okay, it's like the whole reason why we do state akin to sleep is to change our state by creating a memory that we didn't previously have. Okay, so when we go into the silence, when we go into state akin to sleep, we relax the body, close the eyes, shut out any type of hearing. It's really sensory deprivation, just in a meditative practice. And then in a state of awakened imagination, you create a scene that would imply that you have or are the person that you desire to be. So you're changing state. And so that scene that would imply has to be sensory. Okay, so you're basically creating or rearranging sensory impressions so that it's as though you're there and living out a scene that would only happen in your movie that is your life if you are now the person that you desire to be. Okay? So you live that scene in your imagination, and when you do it with sufficient intensity to where you leave that scene and you come back into the present moment, you really feel like you have traveled. Okay, you're like, I was really there. I really experienced that. Okay, and speaking from personal experience, there are times when I do a scene and it feels that way. And there are times when I do a scene where it feels kind of forced and it didn't actually become what Neville would call cubic, meaning it didn't feel equally real to what this reality feels like. I've experienced them both ways. Okay, so the goal is to practice the skill of imagination until we are able to create scenes that are alive and feel tangibly real in our imagination, just like this reality feels tangibly real in the physical. Okay. When you have experienced it in a way where you come back and you're like, wow, I really did travel somewhere in my imagination and I had an experience. Now that experience that became so lucidly real becomes a part of our memories. Okay, it literally becomes part of the body of experiences that form our identity. The idea being that when you come out of SATS, having created a scene and experienced it vividly in that way, you are now a different person. You are now a tangibly, measurably different person than the person who went into SATS because you came out with a new memory. Okay, and that new memory becomes a part of your new state of being. So you've officially changed states because now you have a memory of a scene that you had not experienced prior. Okay, you've had a new experience, a new memory. Your neurons, your synapses have connected in a new way. Okay, so you've actually changed your brain. You have measurably actually changed your state. I actually believe, based on conversations I was having with a friend of mine earlier this week who is taking some advanced forms of biofeedback as a therapy, I believe we can actually measure these things with the devices that we have now. We can actually measure the change in the brain from a state akin to sleep, imaginal act. So it's like literally the shape, the structure of our neurons, synapses changes. And so we come out of that experience and we are a different person. Okay. So the first step is to acknowledge that. Okay. So if you come out of that and you're like, I am now a different person than the person who went into SATS. Okay. Now it's going to be much easier if you really own that awareness that you're now a different person. It's going to be much easier to live in the assumption and the 3D at the same time, because you know that you are a different person. And so you know that the world will reshape itself to echo back to you the song that you're singing on the inside, which just changed harmonies. Okay? So then the next step is to actively look for what has changed on the outside. Okay? So you're actively looking for that new harmony, that new tone, that new part of the music that is coming back as an echo from your state. You're looking for it on the outside. Okay. So I've had some personally crazy experiences from this. I've gone through many dramatic state changes since I learned about Neville, because it was really the first time when I met Neville, as we like to say, because it really is this influence that comes into life and dramatically upgrades everything. When I met Neville, that was really the first time that anyone came to me and said, Josiah, you can literally be anyone you desire to be. And so naturally, I was like overwhelmed with the possibilities. I was like, okay, let me try being this way. Let me try being that way. Right? Until I was able to really find my groove. Like, okay, this is the man that I desire to be. But in that process of going through dramatic state changes and then using this technique of looking for what's different on the outside based on the new song that my state of being is singing on the inside, and understanding that the outside is a reflection and echo back of the state of being that I'm animating. Okay. So actively look for what has changed on the outside. And I've had some pretty crazy experiences, including complete timeline shifts where all of a sudden I'm driving through my town and there's now a building in a place where there was no building. Like literally butterfly effect, reality splits. And because of my state of being, this track ends, this track begins, and in this track, the physical world is manifested differently. And it can make you feel like you're a little mad for a moment, like a little, until you realize really what has happened. You're like, okay, I've entered a new timeline in my reality. And on this timeline, there's a building here. And on the other timeline, there was an empty lot. Okay. So you can literally start to look for what's different. I've also, when you tune your eyes in this way, tune your eyes and your ears, your awareness in this way, where you're actively looking for what's different, you'll notice all kinds of things are different because you're different. Okay. So if you've assumed a new state and then you're operating in your world and you don't see that anything has changed. Okay. First and foremost, it's probably because you're not looking for the change. Okay. Because what you look for, inevitably you will see. That is the nature of reality. What you look for, inevitably you will see. So you have to actively look for and embrace what has changed without a lot of expectation, though. Right. So it's this, again, the spirit of curiosity. You cannot go wrong with the spirit of curiosity. It is really the best way to engage with everything. When you engage with the spirit of curiosity, it's not, oh, I already know this and I'm bored with whatever's happening. No, it's, oh, I'm curious. I wonder what will come out of this, right? When it's a spirit of curiosity, curiosity literally can unlock any door. Okay. So spirit of curiosity, what has changed in my world? Oh, interesting. This person who I've never had a conversation with before, but is in my building or whatever. Like they walk up and all of a sudden now I know their name and they're now, an acquaintance. Well, that's interesting, right? I wonder what that's all about. Curiosity, right? So you'll notice changes all around you in your world. So I think by focusing on recognizing the shift, once you've embodied the shift, recognizing it in the echoes, I think that is massively a best practice to living in the assumption and the 3D at the same time. And it's important to remember that an assumption materializes when it is sufficiently natural to our state. Okay, so the number one reason for failure, if we can use that word, failure, I put it in quotes because I don't believe there really is such a thing as failure. There's really only feedback, right? So it's like, course correction opportunity, right? There is no failure. Failure has an air of permanence to it. So I don't really like the word failure, but really the only reason why something would go other than how you intended it for it to go, according to Neville, is that you have not made it natural enough to your state. Okay. So there's still some part of you that has not fully accepted it. Okay. So when it's perfectly normal and natural, it manifests effortlessly. Okay. The goal is to, by using imagination, make your assumption completely normal and natural. Okay. Now, the bigger the assumption, meaning the bigger the gap between the state that you're leaving and the state that you're entering. Okay. So if you're going from thousandaire to billionaire, that's a pretty big gap. For a lot of thousandaires, there's going to be a significant change of state required to become normal and natural enough in the state of billionaire to be able to effortlessly embody the state. Now, it can be done. There are people who have done it. But it's a best practice to recognize that naturalness is going to be the key. Okay? Naturalness is always the key. So if naturalness is the key, then really the goal is to use our imagination to bring that feeling closer and closer and closer and assume it and learn to not think of, but to think from. Okay? Now, we're on a nice roll here, and I'm just going to keep it going, even though we could get into other parts of the question. I think we've got something good going here, so I'm just going to keep rolling with it. Okay, so let's talk about naturalness. Okay, so you're drawing the feeling closer and closer to you. And you're really, with a spirit of curiosity, exploring what is this feeling like? What is the feeling of naturalness, of being this man, this woman, this human that I desire to be when it's completely normal and natural? What is that feeling like? Okay. And the goal is to switch from thinking of to thinking from. Okay. Now that's something that's thrown out a lot, but let's talk about exactly what that means. Okay. So when I'm thinking of, and I'm going to use the idea of billionaire just because I think that it's interesting and also kind of a curious thing. Okay. So when I'm thinking of billionaire, it's like, oh, well, wouldn't that be nice? Okay. Like, oh, I could probably do this. I could probably do that. It's like you're thinking of it as though it's like over there and you're thinking of, oh, wouldn't that be nice? As you're like entertaining the idea in your awareness. Okay. It's not something that you are, it's something that you're thinking of like you would a storybook character. Okay. So you're thinking of a storybook character and you're thinking about like the life that they're living. And you're like, I wonder, what that would be like, or maybe it's this way, or maybe it's this other way. Okay. When you're thinking from, you are now assuming that state and the full spectrum of polarities associated with that state. Okay. So when you're thinking from, really it leaves this kind of glassy-eyed, rosy perspective that a lot of us tend to place on states that we think we want. We can tend to kind of place them on a pedestal and kind of with, glassy, rose-colored glasses, be like, oh, that must be so nice. It must be so divine and perfect. Okay. But just by nature of placing it on a pedestal, very clearly, we are not thinking from, we're thinking of. Anytime something is like kind of up over there, we're thinking of, not from. When we're thinking from, it leaves this kind of, glossy pedestal rose-colored thing, and it becomes a whole new set of circumstances, okay? Some of them are positive, some of them are neutral, some of them are negative, okay? So the idea being that you will know that you are thinking from when you are so in the state that you can see not just the positive, but also the neutral and the negative aspects of the state, okay? You can see by thinking from what you are giving up by choosing to be in that state. Okay, so every state comes with a set of circumstances that are positive, neutral, and negative. Okay, obviously you don't have to judge them in that way. I'm just using this as a mode of teaching. Okay, so it's a polarity, it's a spectrum, and every state has a spectrum. There is always something that you're giving up to be in a new state. Okay, so you're giving up whatever is not that state to be in the state. Right? So just by very nature, whatever you're choosing, you're unchoosing whatever is not that. Okay. So, for example, anything that you're choosing to be is going to have its really great days and it's just kind of normal everyday days. And then probably it's not so great days, right? That's just the nature of living in a world of polarity. There's going to be all types of circumstances along that full spectrum. So, a great test to determine whether you are living in a naturalness and thinking from the desired state is to see, can you readily identify what is positive about the state, as well as what is neutral or indifferent about the state, and also what is negative or not so desirable about the state. We don't want to assume problems in this space, but just speaking very tangibly, I suppose, every state, in a manner of speaking, comes with a set of problems, okay? A state can be a solution, and it can also present its own unique challenges, okay? So when you are thinking from the state, you will be able to see all of that, okay? So I'm very much in a state that I enjoy, right? I'm very much living a life as the man I desire to be through carefully crafted intention, okay? I love being me. I love doing what I do. And I have great days, and I have neutral, indifferent days, and I have some days where I'm like, okay, grin and bear it, right? That's just a nature of the game. So I can see all of those things because I'm thinking from, because I'm in it, right? But a lot of times when we're outside and we're separated from it and we're looking at it from afar, we tend to kind of erase the other part of the spectrum and only look at the rosy part, okay? And that's thinking of, and that can be entertaining, it can be intellectually stimulating, but it is not a way to manifest circumstances, okay? You have to really assume it, step into it, embody it, give it life, to use it to create circumstances, okay? So coming back to this question, just to make sure that we've thoroughly engaged with it, how do you live in the assumption and the 3D at the same time? So you make natural, right? We go through the whole process, create that new memory. We make that a new experience natural. We're actively looking for what's different based on the newness that is in our being, because we've now created a new aspect of our being through this new memory, through the state akin to sleep, the tools that we've taught here extensively in Sunday Mystery School. We've applied that. Now we've created a new state of being. Now we are that new state. Now we're operating in a 3D reality. We're actively looking for what's changed. We're open. We're curious. Okay. And we've made it natural. And it becomes more natural every day as we're constantly drawing it nearer and nearer to ourselves and assuming it and learning to think from it. One of the best practices for learning to think from a state is to find someone who is already in that state, particularly if there's a big gap, right? There's like, oh, I'm this right now and I'd like to be this. And there's a big gap in mindset and everything else. Find someone who's already there and learn from them. Ask them to be your mentor. Ask them to coach you even, meaning to help you make the mindset shift towards making that state more and more natural. Now, you don't have to do that, but I'm giving that as an example of how you can begin to shift your mindset, begin to shift your state to make it more and more natural. Find a model, someone who's already embodying it, and then learn from them. Either, reading their books or, again, getting them to coach you or mentor you, right? Somehow learn from someone who's already in that state so that you can begin to make it more natural by using them as a pattern, as a model. Okay, let's do one more here. Related to the first question, this is still from Shelley. What is the best tool to stay present in the assumption if a trigger presents itself in 3D, especially doubt? Okay. So the first answer to this question is definitely practice. Okay, so it can take practice to remain present in the assumption. So this is an opportunity to reframe when situations happen and you feel a little knocked out of your state. You can see it as an opportunity to practice. Practice brazen impudence. Practice being resolved, being determined. Practice being steadfast in faith and belief. When doubt presents itself, I'll speak from my own personal experience. When I'm in a situation where I'm assuming something and I'm waiting for it to become embodied in the 3D, and something happens that triggers a feeling of doubt, okay? One of the things that I do is I reflect back on that body of personal experiences, that journal that I have of all of the things that I've consciously manifested, that I write down and record. It's a body of personal evidence that I can't deny because I was there. I experienced them. I wrote them down. I go back to that and I remind myself that I can do this. I remind myself that I have done this. Okay, so it's literally a faith building tool. Okay, so that's one of the things that I would say is best practice, is going back and reminding yourself of the previous times when it's worked. Call back to that previous question. It was tapping into the same memory of a previous circumstance for this new desire. You can definitely do that. Yes. The other thing you can do is you're calling out doubt in particular, but when there's something that you use the word trigger, right? So anytime there's a trigger, when I consider what is a trigger, when we're assuming one thing and then something happens that we would call a trigger, that makes me immediately think that there's something in my state that is not fully in alignment. And this trigger is revealing it to me. Okay, so this would be using this analogy of, it's not even an analogy, it really is the way things work, but we're kind of classifying it in a certain way of the echo. Okay, so my state is singing a song, and then there's an echo back from the external reality that is now reflecting back to me the song that I'm singing. So I see a trigger as a glitch in that process. Okay, so I'm singing on the inside, it's singing out, the echo's coming back, and then there's something in my hearing, as an example, right, that is like a glitch. And it's like I'm not fully able to receive the true full echo of my state from the mirrors of my reality. There's something there. And so it's resistance, and it's in me. Okay, so when there's a trigger, to use that word, I think that's a very specific word chosen for a reason. When it feels like it's a trigger, to me, that is an invitation to say, okay, what part of my state is not fully on board with this new self-identity, with this new self-concept? And usually what I found is that there's some sort of meaning that an older version, meaning a younger version in a spiritual way, a younger version of myself had applied that is now distorting my ability to receive what I'm creating for myself. Okay, so again, it comes back to curiosity. So it's like, okay, what part of me, I'm curious, what part of me is struggling to receive just open-heartedly my birthright, which is I have the right to receive anything, through the echoes that I'm assuming in my state of being. That's my birthright. It's my inheritance. I'm a child of God. Okay. So if something's interrupting that or causing a trigger in that process, that's only coming from within me, has nothing to do with the outside. And it is some sort of artifact of my state, of my self-concept. So let me ask what that is. Go into the silence, make it an inquiry into the truth of self. What is there? What is going on? So what I found in my own journey with this sort of thing is that sometimes I will find that there is some sort of old story that I need to revise, to let go of, to up level to the level of love, because I applied a meaning that was less than full acceptance. Right? That's what up leveling to the level of love means, is you level it up to full acceptance. There's some part of that story that I hadn't reached there. So that distorted echo off the mirrors alerts me to that. And then in the silence, I can go in and I can heal it. Okay. So this is open-hearted self-inquiry. There's an authenticity to it. It's like, okay, let me go into the silence and let me ask in my own being, what is the source of this, my emotional reaction to this circumstance, which we're calling a trigger? Where is that coming from? What is the story that I've told myself that caused me to react in that way? Okay. And then finding a way to love that. There's some nuance to that. It's definitely something that can take practice and skill. But I think what underlies this whole discussion about triggers or emotional reactions, really, we can ground it in this idea of heart coherence, which is a physiological meditative state that you can just live in all the time. Heart coherence, it's a meditative practice. I teach it extensively in the mastermind. Every time we do mastermind meditations, we start with the process of heart coherence. So my mastermind members are definitely familiar with it. Those of you that maybe haven't heard me talk about it before, look it up on YouTube. There's guided meditations. It's very prominent in the teachings of all the heart math people, including Joe Dispenza. And it really is a process for aligning the consciousness and intelligence of the brain, the consciousness intelligence of the heart, the consciousness intelligence of the gut, so that you become a whole being. And in that place of being a whole being, it is much easier to do authentic self-inquiry, this process of going into the silence and asking, okay, what is my resistance to this? Let me heal it. It's also much easier to live in the assumption in the 3D at the same time, if you're living in a place of the heart where you can love literally everything that happens in your reality, right? Okay. Feels like that question is complete. And I think this is a good opportunity to go ahead and turn it over to the Zoom room, some mastermind members who have joined me in the Zoom room, and just open it up for some collaboration, contribution. So let me adjust my settings here so that we can do that. And let's see what we have. Okay. Okay, there's the Zoom room. Hello, mastermind members. All right, go ahead, Orlena. Yeah, go ahead.
Several questions. So, will we always see different versions of ourselves in our lifetime? And when we do, what is the best way to not judge them or be critical of yourself?
I love that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So it really is a part of the state, right? So as we raise our whole consciousness to the level of love, and we ultimately enter what is the promise, which is the state of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was a teacher and he was a healer, and he talked about these ideas. He gathered people. He spoke to them. There's a lot of people that were very interested in what he had to say, a lot of people that weren't very interested in what he had to say. It's like the whole story of the New Testament. So I think really, if that story is our story, it really does indicate what the state entails. And so I think the state does entail, when you reach a place where you're really embodying full enlightenment, I think we're always going to experience parts of ourselves that show up embodied in other characters and are at a different place. And so I think really our role is to learn. I think there can be some learning associated with it. That's why I say to learn, but really to love them. And I think in some cases we learn to love them because maybe at some cases we're like, okay, I don't really know how to do this, but it really becomes opening the heart and learning to love them. And I think that when we love someone, and we're able to hold them in a place where we see them exactly as they are and appreciate them exactly as they are without needing them to be different, and also simultaneously holding the vision of a higher possibility for them. I've heard Greg Braden teach this as being true compassion. True compassion is holding space for the person to experience whatever they're experiencing right now and meeting them there in that and feeling it to a certain extent with them, but also keeping the vision of a higher possibility. So it's like, okay, I see this person, they're deep in experiencing a nightmare, basically in the waking dream. Like they're deep in the nightmare, and I see that, and my heart is open, and I'm able to sit with them in that. But I'm also in my conscious awareness, I know that this too shall pass, and I'm holding a vision of them in a brighter state. Right. So I think when we're able to do that, I think that our tendencies to judge naturally dissipate.
So because they're really you, right? So then
Yeah.
you're kind of forgiving or just having compassion for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. And I've been very present to that.
That's pretty difficult to do sometimes is,
Yeah.
having compassion for yourself.
Mhm.
So yeah, how do you do that really,
So it really is a softening of the heart. And this is why I really touched on heart coherence there. I really feel like that really is the root of how we do this. It's literally tuning our physiology, because we are a human experience. In addition to being divine in nature, we are a human experience. We're really learning to manage these temples of living flesh. So I think it really is a softening of the heart to and entering of a place of compassion, so that we can see the part of ourselves that they represent, to see the God in them, in the state that they're in, and to love the God in them, regardless of what they're doing in their humanness.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my next question, real quick. Okay, so if you are seeing the positives, neutrals, and the negatives of a new state, how do you acknowledge the negatives without bringing it into a flourishing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand?
Yeah, I do. So everything manifests in a polarity. And so I think really and this is something that it really feels like it's a cutting edge conversation. I really feel like it's learning to choose the spectrum of polarity, right? So one of the things that comes to mind with this is it's like, okay, there could be a lot of different parts of like kind of the negative polarity that could show up with this state.
Okay.
Let me choose the one that I would want to correspond, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's kind of a cutting edge conversation to have, to like really think of it this way, but it's like there could be, even on the negative side of the spectrum, there's problems. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. And then there's other problems like, yeah, I really don't want to deal with that. Right. But if you embrace like, hey, it could come along with this, then it's like, you're kind of setting yourself up for success. I feel like this is a topic we could go a lot deeper into, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want the negatives in your life, you know what I mean? But then you have to acknowledge it. So it's like, how do you balance that?
You don't want to create unnecessary negatives. Okay. So first of all, we have to acknowledge the limitation of our language, because we're, even just by insinuating that something is negative, we're kind of casting judgment on it. It's useful for a teaching conversation like what this is, but it's important to understand that really it's our judgment of something that makes it negative, right? Because otherwise it's just a circumstance. It's just something that it's part of the plot device, of being the author, right? So I think that's important to acknowledge also. There is some inherent limitations in our language, even by calling it that. But yeah.
Right. Okay. That's
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Arlena. Andrea, go ahead.
Morning.
Good morning.
The whole conversation and your questions and everything is so wonderful, so exciting, so fulfilling.
Good.
What really spoke to me today, and I can't believe, I could study metaphysics for at least 10 years. I never thought about writing down my manifestation. There have been so many.
Yeah.
I have to go way back. I wanted a red convertible Volvo.
Oh, hey.
And it appeared on my street for sale. Just so many things. So I'm going to start a manifestation book and write down all that stuff.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
It's awesome. And then when you talked about Neville saying there's nothing but God, and I was thinking about how, we're all one, all oneness.
Yeah.
And like Orlando was saying, it's like you're forgiving yourself, you're giving grace to yourself, really. And I practice that too, because it's hard. Sometimes I'll judge somebody, then I'll tell myself, say that about yourself.
Yes. I like that. Don't say that about yourself. Yes. I like that.
To remind myself, the Global Coherence Conference, are you going? Joe Dispenza speaking and Jack Canfield's in April 2025.
That sounds nice. I think I got a mailer about that. I haven't opened it yet, though. Yeah, I need to take a look. That could be pretty great. Okay. A great place for it. Yes.
Absolutely. So if you go, I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah.
The time when you took everybody to Barbados.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. Barbados and Santa Cruz. We could do that. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the invite. I'll take a look. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Beautiful. All right. Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. And that sounds like that process of writing down manifestations into a manifestation journal sounds like a great activity for end of year, looking ahead to the new year, end of a cycle, beginning of a new cycle, that type of thing. I think that could be a very powerful exercise for really empowering your manifestations into 2025.
Like the law of attraction, the more you write them down, the more you do.
That's true. That's true. Beautiful. Thank you, Andrea. Hey, Bill, go ahead.
Hey, talking about triggers.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me, it brought back an old memory. Mom telling me first time I'd ever shot a gun or anything like that. He told me the trigger's always there. It depends on where you position your finger as to whether or not you're going to pull that trigger or if you're just ready for the trigger.
Oh.
And when you basically like hunting or target shooting or something like that, you never put your finger on the trigger when you're moving the gun around. You only move it when you're focused, when you're ready. So you can always have that trigger, and your finger has to be positioned just right for it. And then when you're ready to shoot, that's when you pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people get the trigger confused with the action that's going on in life, say like the doubts or the fears or whatever that comes along. And to me, that trigger's always there. You just got to learn where to position your finger at, or how to position your life to be ready for those triggers.
Mm-hmm.
Those triggers are always going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's inevitable. When you're in a good state, that bad state's right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you got to just be ready for it,
Mm-hmm.
and take focus. Focus is the biggest thing, and carry yourself through once you do decide. I mean, some triggers are good and some are bad. So when that trigger's right, you take aim and you shoot.
Mm-hmm.
When it's not, keep your finger off the trigger, because if you move any bit at all, that trigger's going to go off if that finger's on there.
Mm-hmm.
That's my story.
Some wise words there, Bill. Yeah.
Add a attitude of gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude.
That's
Indeed.
the key. That's the key.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, taking it to another level. And I like what you said about they're always potentially there. And so choosing to, I think, really embodying a lucidity in our state where we're aware. And like you said, like you don't really focus being the key, right? So like really being focused and having that high level awareness as opposed to going into reactivity or like the knee jerk, right? You don't want to just be swinging the gun around with your finger on the trigger, right? You got to like be very intentional about it. So I think that there's that's something very beautiful to consider there. Just kind of take it in a more literal way, even talking about the trigger. Thank you for that, Bill. Okay. Anyone else in the Zoom room? Okay. All right. Yeah, so I think this is a very thought-provoking set of questions today, and I thank the students that sent those in for the thought and the well-considered nature of the questions, and just the opportunity and invitation that they represented to go a little deeper in some of our conversations about how to embody these ideas and really make them alive for us. And I trust that the discussion here today was inspiring in some way, but also I'm aware that sometimes we talk about things in this space, and I'm speaking from experience too. I'll talk about things in this space that will come back several days later. You know, it's like seeds are planted here, and then several days later, something that was said or an understanding that was unlocked will become alive for me in my world in some way, in a situation or in circumstance. And so many of us looking in time and space about where we are right now, the present moment, so many of us are going to be engaging with family and friends over the next, say 10 days. And usually wherever family and friends and social gatherings are involved, there are all kinds of opportunities for growth and development and acceleration. And my suggestion, homework. We haven't had homework in a while. I mean, we always have homework, right? The homework is always to practice, but we're going to have a specific assignment here at the conclusion of this Sunday Mystery School session. So the specific homework to practice making these ideas alive in your reality, the homework is to pre-pave in imagination some of your holiday gatherings, or really, if you want to be the A+ student, all of your holiday gatherings. So the idea being that if you're going to go and see family, pre-pave in your imagination by sitting in the silence prior to going and seeing family. Pre-pave in your imagination. What would I hear a particular family member say? Something that is beautiful, that is loving, that is inspiring, that implies some sort of beautiful outcome. You're really taking the authorship over the event. What would I hear them say, or what would I see them do, or what would be a scene that would imply that they are in good health or in good spirits, or that we had a successful family gathering, or some sort of objective, and then pre-paving in your imagination before going to interact with all of these people. And by doing that and then entering that experience in a spirit of curiosity, that's the other key takeaway I want you to leave this conversation with. The importance of the spirit of curiosity, pre-paving an imagination and then engaging with these interactions from a place of curiosity. And then notice what happens. And when you have successful manifestations and you hear that person say what you heard them say in your imagination before they came and said it in real life, right? In the mirrors of the world, the echoes, when the materium echoes back to you what you first heard in your imagination, write it down in your manifestation journal. Make it a part of your body of evidence. That's all for today's episode of Sunday Mystery School. This week on Neville and Chill, which is Tuesday night, Christmas Eve, we are going to be exploring the mystic symbolism of the Christmas tradition. Now, this is something that I have had a desire to do for as long as I've known Neville. Ever since I met Neville and started to understand what he was saying about the Bible, and then began to have mystical experiences of my own, that mirrored what he has taught, the magic of Christmas has really come alive in a very beautiful way. And so I'm excited to have a Neville and Chill conversation on Christmas Eve where we can explore the illuminated symbolism of Christmas together and to celebrate the birth of the Christ within. So look forward to seeing you all there for Neville and Chill. Until next time, my friends, imagine wisely, and we'll talk to you all again soon.